Welcome into a new edition of Clippers Talk. It's a Clippers Talk Live. I'm Adam Osland. It's good to be back with you guys after doing 4 different shows this past weekend. We had our first Clippers preseason game. They lost by 1 to the Golden State Warriors on a game-winning three-pointer by Waters, and we unpacked it all with multiple podcasts for you guys right here on the YouTube channel. Clippers Talk, plus we were on the Patriot AM 1150, where we will be tomorrow. Programming note, when the Dodgers are on AM 570 LA Sports. We are on the Patriot AM 1150, but I'm hoping to have the pregame show and the postgame show once again on the YouTube side also. So you guys can come in here and interact just like you will be today as we have a guest on for this Clippers Talk Live. It's an accomplished and experienced writer, journalist, reporter for the Southern California News Group and the OC Register. It's Mirjam Swanson. Mirjam, thanks for joining me here on Clippers Talk.
Hello, Clipper Nation. What's up, Adam? Thanks for having me.
Let's go. So I had a couple of questions pertaining to some recent Clippers news that I wanted to discuss with you because I know way back when, I think it was last November, when PJ Tucker came over to the Los Angeles Clippers, he made it known pretty much from the outset that he wasn't exactly wanting to be traded by the Philadelphia 76ers. He wanted to stay with them because he had a starting role and was getting over 20 minutes a night, and went to a few different outlets, including the OC Register, to express himself and let everyone know that he wants to be a starter, that he wants more playing time. So it's almost like from the very beginning, he wanted to be traded after being traded to the Clippers in some ways. And there was some frustration that boiled up. And then we saw throughout the regular season, he was suspended at one point and sent home, he and Bones Highland, right after the All-Star break because he wasn't traded at the trade deadline. He was also fined $75,000 at one point by the NBA by making it known he wanted to be traded. And now, once again, the Clippers and him seem to be at an impasse of where his role could be with this team, so he would like to go elsewhere. It looks like the Clippers are going to be accommodating to that, but just where do you think this situation is headed? Is something going to be done sooner than later, or is this going to be dragged out for a little bit while PJ Tucker is no longer with the team?
In all honesty, like at media day, I somehow in my mind I thought that this public impasse had already happened because I was like, oh yeah, he's still technically on the Clippers. Just because in my mind it separated the entities. I thought they would put him over there because I no, I don't. Who's going to trade for him? He's got a big fat contract, and in this NBA with the way that they even the Lonnie Walkers of the world are not getting what they're worth, right? And so who's going to overpay for PJ Tucker? So yeah, he doesn't fit and is not willing to fit with the Clippers apparently. And no, I don't see any suitors unless trade deadline comes around and something makes sense for another team who's trying to move money around or whatever. But going into media day, I for some reason had thought that this already had happened, that they had already shut the door on him, and I was like, oh yeah, that actually hasn't happened yet. I was just preparing for it to happen.
No, it's felt inevitable that basically if they could have traded him by now, they would have. But as you mentioned, the contract situation makes things much more difficult. And there's a tangled web here of how
Yeah,
you have to unload him because you
yeah,
likely have to include another player to sweeten the deal or a pick, which the Clippers don't have many of. What
right.
was your interaction, I guess, with him, if any, when he was on the team this past year and just what you observed from him in his mentorship role, whatever that was, and just his play on the Clippers when he did get, I felt like 3 different opportunities to prove what he had. In fact, he
Mhm.
played the final game of the season in Game 6 against the Dallas Mavericks. He was a starter in that game. I feel like they gave him a real shot here, Miriam.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, so Janice Carr, who is our day-to-day beat writer for the Clippers, would probably know more. I think she talked to him at length. I think she might have been the first one to write a PJ Once Out story. But from what I saw, yeah, to your point, that it isn't like they just put him on the shelf and let him sit there without giving him any run on multiple occasions, including in Game 6. And I'll be honest, in Game 6, I think he he brought a little bit of a spark because of where the Clippers were. with all that was going on. Yeah, but he's just I don't. Yeah, they're trying to get younger and more athletic. And I don't think he fits what they're doing. So, and to your point, they did give him opportunities. It didn't work out. I think they would love to trade him, but I don't see who's going to trade for him.
Yeah, it seems like maybe at some point they'll just have to waive him and eat the contract. I know they don't want to have to use the stretch provision, which would
Mm,
space it out over 3 different years, about
hmm
$3.5 million per year, should they go that route, because it's about $11 million total. There's not exactly a great position that the Clippers are in right now. It's really difficult from their end. And
So it's kind
I
of the cost to get Harden, though, right? That's what they want. Like, now this is basically Harden's team, so this part of what you pay for, part of the price you pay for Harden. So you can look at it as, well, that was this is really unfortunate that they've got this PJ Tucker situation, but it's kind of just, it came with the
yeah.
trade for Harden. So, and obviously they are really reliant on Harden, and this is their guy. So you know also, it's hard, like, you feel bad for PJ to not get to do the thing he loves to do, but also he's being well compensated as an athlete who gets to do watch the games
Yeah.
like us.
There was a whole nother route where if he just didn't opt into this final year, he could have become a free agent and gone wherever he should please if a team out there was looking for his services still. And I'm not sure what his utility is at this point, given what we saw with the Clippers this past season. Have you dealt with anything similar in the past in covering sports and just athletes who maybe at the end of their days and having trouble reconciling the fact that their sports mortality, you could say, is coming to an end? It just seems like it's not always easy for these guys, obviously, because this is all they have known: compete, 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 and then it
For
just comes
sure.
to an end at an early age.
um I don't know if it's trying to think. I Not exactly the same, but you see sort of Boogie Cousins going through different teams trying to get one last go. Marcus Morris kind of envisioned a bigger role for himself than maybe Clipper fans thought he should have had.
Yeah.
The guys, as they kind of get to the end, um, yeah, I mean, there's endless probably examples, but the one that kind of is in this specific situation where they came in a trade for a star and have a nice deal, kind of because the star, right? Didn't James like give back money to Philly to like accommodate PJ? So this whole thing is
That's a
very
great
tangled.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it is
go.
a very tangled web, as you put it.
A tangled web we weave. Yeah, it is part of the deal when you bring in James Harden. And that's where I think things were lost on, maybe, I don't know, PJ's self-awareness, because they weren't trading for you to begin with. He's saying, I didn't want to come here. They had to take on your contract, because
Uh-huh.
otherwise maybe they would have had to give up, I don't know, Terrence Mann or somebody like that. It sounded like the big holdout for a while was probably Nico Batum, and not wanting to have to give him up to the Philadelphia
Mhm.
76ers. They
Mhm.
eventually acquiesced and the trade was consummated, but it was at the cost of having to bring in a guy who just hasn't had a great run of success at this age with the Los Angeles Clippers, and he's a year older now at the age of 39. We are getting a lot of nice comments in here from Mirjam Swanson, including JMI1324, who said, I read a lot of your articles, Mirjam, and your work is sensational. If no one has ever told you that, I think they have. Be proud of your work and the career you built for yourself. Prayer emoji. So this is cool. People in the comment section, if you guys have questions for Mirjam, we will get to them as we move along here. But I just wanted to put a little bit of a button on the PJ Tucker situation, which we just found out about yesterday. And it's not like it was a surprise or anything like that, but it's just the latest chapter in the saga of what's going to happen with PJ, because I always wondered if he'd show up to training camp, if they would want him around the team, because if he was still making a stink and just wasn't there boosting morale, would it be better for them to send him home? And that has happened pretty much at this point. We'll keep you abreast of the situation. The more you know, Star. So Kawhi Leonard, speaking of stars, he gave I think it was an impromptu interview at halftime of the game on Saturday. because I didn't know it was coming till Carlo Jimenez was like, hey, check this out. Kawhi's about to talk with the media. And I was like, oh, well, here we go. So a couple of the highlights from that conversation with those who were there in Hawaii, and Miriam and I were part of the Left Behind crew, unfortunately, with Justin Rousseau, who we had on the podcast as well. We stayed on the mainland for this one, but everybody's back now. Clippers in San Diego tomorrow night for preseason game number 2. But Kawhi, and speaking with the media, a couple of the highlights that came out right away, the one that stood out or was hilarious to everyone that believes Kawhi Leonard is just unintentionally funny with his bluntness and just how deadpan he can be with his answers. He was asked about who has stood out to him at training camp. He started to talk about the young guys, but then he ended it with, nobody's really stood out to me so far. I didn't take it as a slight, Miriam. I didn't take it that way. I think it was just a Kawhiism. Is that how you saw it?
100%, 100%. I mean, this is, yeah, like, come on, Clipper fans, you speak Kawhi by now. Like he is neither like trying to motivate anyone on some 3D level chess. He's not like don't be like, oh my god, that's like the world's most transparent superstar, because it's not that either. He's just Kawhi. Like, he's like the guy famously, like Mark Medina once asked him, like, he had a crazy dunk in a game and he was like, Kawhi, can you tell us about the dunk? He's like, well, I got it, they passed it to me, I dribbled 3 times, I palmed it in my hand, and I jumped and I put it in the hoop.
I remember this. I remember it was against Daniel Tice of the Boston Celtics at the time.
It was the Celtics, yes. And it was like, and it was so, he is the most literal person, right? He's just super, So maybe, like, he went down the list of what he saw in all of them. So it's not like he doesn't know or doesn't care. And I almost took it as him wanting to not put anyone ahead of anyone else. Like, you know what I mean? He's like, I'm not gonna be like, yo, Chris Dunn is killing Kevin Porter Jr. Like, he was just like, yeah, I just gave you an essay on our new crop of young players. And that's it. To me, that's how I heard it.
No, totally. And people are probably making too much out of it. It is funny. It is Kawhi. I think he's unintentionally adorable sometimes with his delivery, the way he goes about things, and he has the laugh and all these things. It's part of the reason we love him. But I agree. I think overall it was, he didn't want to put anyone on a pedestal or set them apart and make it seem like he was showing favoritism to one player or something like that at the expense of another.
Right, exactly. And then like people are like, well, he didn't mention, blah, blah, and then it'd be a whole nother. I don't even think he thought that deeply about it. I mean, he was probably being honest, but like, I don't think anyone should be offended or read more into it than yeah.
Now, this is what happens in a live stream sometimes, where somebody goes back to something else we were just talking about, and then I feel like I have to clear it up here, Miriam. Raul Perez says, sorry, Adam, need to stop mentioning PJ Tucker not declining his player option. That was never really an option since his other option was a minimum contract. PJ knows whining will get him traded. Well, to me, it's a little bit of a scenario, Miriam, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going to opt into a contract with the Clippers for $11 million, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too, and then also dictate where you want to play for that $11 million. Like, he could have been a free agent. He could have had all the maneuverability you could ever ask for. I understand it was unrealistic for him to do that, but I think I would respect it if he said, look, it's one thing to opt in and be a good soldier and say you're with this Clippers team and you're honoring the contract. It's another to opt in and then say, now trade me. Even though I opted into the $11 million. That's the disconnect for me.
I see your callers, or Raul's point of
basically.
I mean, sure, because like because like 11 million versus whatever a million is not really that's like that much of a decision. But if you're like desperate to play basketball still and think that you can find a home and you need that run and you need that playing time and your heart and your soul and your pride dictates that was technically an option. And otherwise, like to your point, like you can take the money and be that employee that shows up and does what's needed, if that's mentoring people or whatever it is. But these NBA guys are NBA guys. They've been great for a long time and they do get to dictate a lot. It is a players' league. So you can also try this route, that's the third road.
Player empowerment era. We're in it right now, and PJ Tucker looks to be taking advantage of it. Back to Kawhi Leonard. He did say he was asked from, I think it was Om Yamasuk, who asked him about if he could jump right into regular season game one if he hasn't played yet in the preseason. And while he wasn't ultra specific about it, he did say, quote, "It's always a buildup to playing in a game." It made me think, Miriam, that maybe this means there will be a little bit of a read or a tell on the situation with Kawhi. If he plays in a preseason game, there's a higher likelihood of him playing in game one because that would be part of the cycle of the ramp up and the build up he's talking about. Did you see it that way?
I have no information on this, but to me, I would not get your hopes up if you're a Clipper fan. To me, I don't know. Like until you see Kawhi play, I wouldn't assume that anything he's like, unless someone says specifically he's going to be in the lineup or he's going to, I think that to me, I read that as, or I heard that as he is not going to play in the preseason. Or in, what was it? It was game one, right? Like he's, that he's, to me, I heard I'm not playing yet, but I could be wrong.
No, I think a lot
Maybe
of
because I'm
people heard it
conditioned
that way
to
too.
conditioned to hear it that way, probably.
I mean, that's fair. When it comes to Kawhi Leonard, things are always a little bit murky with the information, and it's never that clear. Have you ever, in covering this team, how difficult is it at times? And it's not like this is totally unique to Kawhi Leonard when it comes to how much information there is about a player's injury. Lakers fans feel the same way about Anthony Davis. Everybody has their own guy where you kind of just don't know the availability. Kawhi could be an extreme example, but I'm just thinking it's not a total outlier. What has it been like covering him and his tenure with the Clippers?
Frustrating as hell, like to be honest, because that's all anybody wants to know about, and understandably so. I mean, like this is as Kawhi goes, the Clippers go. When he plays, I mean, what's their winning? They like win close to 70% of their games or something.
Yeah.
When he doesn't play, they're under 500. So, like, if you're a Clipper fan, in addition to just the fact that he's really fun to watch play basketball, he's like an absolute killer and just one of the really all-time greats. So, of course, your fan base was invested. um and and like I always say, like I really like respect Clipper fans because it's hard to be a Clipper fan in LA for a lot of people. And so like you got this group riding with you, and like they are left in the dark so much, but a lot of it I think is because it is impossible to say for sure like how his body is responding.
Right. He
So
doesn't know
it's
how his body's going to
right.
respond. So how
Yeah.
can anyone else
So
know?
exactly. You can't just be like, yeah, expect Kawhi to be like, well, I'm gone, November 12th. I am blah blah blah. Like it depends.
Yeah.
So that's a part of it. But they are obviously it's Kawhi and is super private. He has always been super private. So that adds a whole nother layer of intrigue and mystery and vagueness. And so yeah, so as far as like covering that, it's difficult. And to your point, I think the NBA is going more and more that way.
Yeah.
But uh, but still, I think like other teams, like the last year, toward the end of the season, Ty Lue made a comment at a pregame where like, well, yeah, the plan is for Kawhi to play for now, and I was like, for now, like, and at the same day, like Giannis got hurt, and the next morning, like the Bucks put out a press release. This is an injury, like the time frame is 3 to 4 weeks, and which is not like, of course, no one's going to hold you to that. Like if it lasts longer than that, that's that. But when people know what the injury is, as opposed to he'll be okay for now, it's easier to sort of set your mentality or expectations as a fan, I would think.
When you're at a press conference with Kawhi Leonard, I think you were with the team back with COVID and we had Zoom meetings and everything. Have you had any? You mentioned some interesting interaction with the way he is a literalist and describes things. Have you had a interesting back and forth with Kawhi before? Do you just have to know a very specific way to maybe phrase your question with him that's different than other guys, maybe?
That's a good question. What I can say about Kawhi is that when he is answering your questions, it kind of looks like he's super bored and would rather be doing anything else in the world than answering your questions. But then if you go back and you listen and you transcribe and you're writing an article and you take what he told you and you're like, oh, that's actually like a pretty insightful answer. Like he gives you, he is more insightful and better spoken than a lot of people. Like he actually is a great, not a great quote, but he's he's a good quote. Like he can tell
Yeah.
you what he's thinking. He can, and then you pair that with his sort of the how you dunk a basketball, and it's like the deadpan part of it is really funny. So yeah, I don't know. It's he is one of a kind. That is for sure.
I like the way you kind of dissected that question earlier regarding everyone talking about the end of it, of him saying nobody stood out to me so far. But before that, there was a lot of talk about his teammates and young guys and watching them. And everybody forgets about that because
Mhm.
there's this funny blurb at the very end. It kind of underscores what you're saying there with Kawhi. It can be very insightful and illuminating listening to him. I know he also talked about, and I think this picked up a lot of steam too, rightfully so, because it's a question that's been out there for a while. I've always wondered, is it more physical in today's NBA to play the 3 or the 4? Because if you're playing the 3, if you're playing the small forward, I would think you'd get more cross matchups where you're on the perimeter having to chase guys around more. But Kawhi made it sound like last season saying I probably had top 5 most miles ran or top 10 most miles ran in the NBA. And Lon Murray looked it up, and on the Clippers on average per game, he was at the highest amount of ground traveled at 2.5 miles per game. So he's right about that. And everybody knows the Sport VU cameras can track these things, and the Clippers know exactly what's going on. But do you see this, or did you see it, as Kawhi saying, maybe grab me a power forward, please, so I can go back to playing the 3 and not the power forward anymore? Because he did say we kind of have to look at whether it's beneficial for me to play the 4, and it's backed up by maybe it is much more physical and taxing on a guy with right knee issues.
Yeah, I think they should do whatever they can do to manage his load um, on the court, on the court when he's playing, and otherwise too. But yeah, the less banging Kawhi could do, the better. The less mileage Kawhi could put on those legs of his, the better. For sure. I guess so. Like he's like, go give me. I mean, is Nico the 4 for them? How does that? What do you think? Because he's like,
I,
who's gonna play the 4 otherwise? I'm like,
I think Nico could, but he has shied away, as you know, in the past from
yeah.
wanting to start. I remember with him and Marcus Morris, when he started the season and Marcus was injured, and he was like, I want to come off the bench and volunteer to do that. It always seems like his self-sacrifice for the team is real, and he's
Hmm.
somebody that just doesn't get caught up in the bright light stuff, and he just wants to be a
Hmm.
glue guy and a team player and super glue
Hmm.
guy, really, for this Clippers team, a connector out there. I Kobe Brown doesn't look to be there yet, even though he had a really good preseason game 1. I'm sure he'll get some opportunities, but it still probably makes the most sense to have quiet power forward given the roster construction. And he even said, who played it last year? He's like, it was me. And he said it was probably going
Yeah.
to be the same thing.
Hmm.
So I don't know. And it's just hard. I know fans say, go out there and get another 4. It's like, okay,
Mm.
where are all these super athletic rebounding 4s that can also shoot? Because next to Ivica Zubac, you want a guy that can shoot. That's why PJ Tucker at the 4 didn't work at all next to him, because he stopped shooting 3-pointers. And so it crowded space. So John Collins
Mhm.
is always the name people bring up from the Utah Jazz. I just don't know if there's a perfect guy out there, if they have the assets to just go out and get someone. And it might just have to be Kawhi at that position until further notice. I don't know where else they could go with it, Miriam.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Where do you how do you see them using him this year? If he's able to play, like obviously, like how much, like as if you're a Clipper, if you're a Clipper fan, like what are you comfortable with? Do you want him to play super sparingly so he's available in the postseason? But like how
I'm
sparingly can he play and then they still make the postseason? Like
Yeah, it's a
what?
balance, right? I am at a place where I'm open to pretty much any suggestions. In the past, when people are like, Just wait to play him till March. Well, now you can't really do that because you might find yourself out of the play-in at that point because of how competitive the West is. Outside of
Mm-hmm.
that, if somebody told me play him only twice a week, I'd be open to it with just what we've seen the past couple of years. I right off top, I don't think he should be playing any back-to-backs. And they have 16 back-to-backs, so that's
Mm-hmm.
16 games right off the top. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't see that as beneficial for his right knee. So that puts him at 66 games. And then you just think there's probably some, March has 17 games. There's going to be some stressful weeks in there where you might want to have him take a game off. I don't know if 55 games would be most reasonable or in the ballpark, but we really don't know what's going to happen with the right knee because my question was this. When the swelling started in late March, early April, and then it started to go down, it sounded like they thought they had a handle on it, but was it
Mm-hmm.
only going down because he wasn't playing high-level basketball anymore? And then when he did in game 2 against Dallas, did it go way back up because game 3 he
Mm-hmm.
didn't look good at all, and they said it
Mm-mm.
didn't
Yeah.
respond well after game 2. So my biggest concern with him is just that playing is going to reintroduce the swelling or maybe reset it. I
Mm-hmm.
hope that's
Mm-hmm.
not the case. And it sounded like he had a procedure in May. So that's a new variable and wrinkle to all of this. But hearing that 5 months after the initial swelling, it's still just almost down, but not fully down, and he's not fully 100%. That has to be a little bit concerning for a guy like Kawhi Leonard. How do you
Mm-hmm.
feel about this specific and new type of injury he's been dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was a doctor. I'm not a doctor. As Kawhi will remind us all when he talks about this. I'm not going to talk to you guys about it because you're not doctors.
That's
Um,
fair.
yeah, but I'm like, okay, facts. Um, yeah, it's like if it were just a matter of scaling it back and it being, just load management, I guess that's you could kind of put that puzzle together. But I mean, that's not going to be that easy. That's not even easy. But it's like his body is going to respond like it responds. So I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you just cross your fingers or pray or something. I don't know. It sucks.
I always think about what Toronto did, and I think they came out and said he's not playing more than 60 games or whatever it was that
Hmm.
season, 18-19.
Hmm.
And they kept to a very specific plan the entire year, and you kind of had a heads up on exactly how it was going to go. Now, I think they got lucky
Hmm.
that there weren't any setbacks, so I don't know if you could
Right.
just say, yeah, we got a plan and this is how it's going to go. But it did that year. He still was
Uh-huh.
limping at times in the playoffs, though. He was playing through
Uh-huh.
something.
Yeah,
So
by the end of it, he was you could see he was laboring on it. Yeah. But they won a title.
They
So,
did. It worked
yeah.
well enough, but now we're talking about Kawhi since then has had an ACL, a meniscus, and now this new swelling. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not even the same scenario as things
Mm-hmm.
started with, parameter-wise with the Toronto Raptors. So I don't know. I just back-to-backs don't seem wise to me, and there's 2 of them, like, within the first 6 games of the regular season. So we might find out their game plan right away. But who knows? Is he even going to be able to play opening night with this build-up talk that's going on and him not doing drills and just doing strengthening of the knee so far? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. I just want him to be healthy. I want him to be safe. I want him to have a long, successful career and be available for the postseason, like you said. That's what everybody wants to see.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely like if you're a Clipper fan, you look at last year, that stretch last year, like earlier in the year, right? Where they were like until the All-Star break or so, where they were just like every day, I felt like somebody was coming up to me and they're like, "Are the Clippers going to win the championship this year?" Because they looked unbeatable. Um, and like, what if you took that and put that in spring, right? Like, if you could have that version of Kawhi, then like there's a world where that could happen. So like, how do you get that there? I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, that might be exactly what they're trying to figure out. From all the verbiage that we've gotten with that press conference with Coach Lou and Lawrence Frank, and then
Exactly.
Kawhi talking about it media day, that
Hmm.
makes sense to me. Just how can we bottle up how good he looked, where he had the highest level of efficiency in NBA history for a 30
Hmm.
game stretch, and make that happen when it matters most,
Which is
So
what the term, when it matters, right? That's what you can, what he said, what you kind of get the vibe that they're all saying. So, and we know what that means. So yeah.
yeah, we know Kawhi's about championships, and while he said I'm obligated to play 82, it hasn't worked. Like if anybody should get a pass from the this guy doesn't care and he just wants to load manage and take his checks, it's like no, Kawhi wants to play. The problem is his right knee does not want to cooperate for the extended amount of games there are in a regular season. He's obviously injury prone. I think he should get a break in this area by now from the national media and that narrative of, oh, Kawhi's the face of load management. It's like, well, have you seen what has happened the last 4 years? His body is broken down. That right knee is broken down 4 straight times. So it's just, yeah, I feel for him. And I know a lot of people, they just think, well, an athlete is making millions of dollars and what does it matter? It's his legacy. It's his passion. It's what he loves to do. I still feel for the athlete. Like I do think you can separate the money from the love of the game to some extent, Mirjam.
I mean, yeah, they're human beings who yes, are incredibly blessed and fortunate, but also human beings who worked very, very hard to get in this position. I think Kawhi being so stoic and so shielded from the world, like when Klay Thompson went through all his stuff, he was very open. Like he's on Instagram, he does interviews, he like expresses himself and sort of, like it made it easier, I think, for people to sympathize with what he was going through. And Kawhi is very like, he doesn't do all that stuff. So his persona maybe adds to the disconnect a little bit. But that doesn't change that doesn't change the fact that he's, the real dude, who has feelings and is going through. Yeah. And obviously, like, look at last year's playoffs. He wanted very much to play and his body didn't cooperate.
I do want to address some of the comments section here. We have Mirjam Swanson on from the OC Register. I just want to address something real quick. This was very inflammatory. Jay said, can we just say Adam has Clipper Nation on lock? Thank you for the content. Almost makes me forget you were a Laker fan. Okay. I was a Magic Johnson fan in like the late 80s, early 90s, but I was not afterwards, maybe a little bit during Vlade Divac and Nick Van Exel and those guys. I couldn't stand the Kobe Shaq era of the Lakers. This is not some big turn for me. Come on. There's like one picture of me as a 5-year-old wearing a Lakers hat, and I can never live it down. Even though I grew up in Sacramento, was a huge Kings fan. We have a question here for Mirjam. I think it's a good one. JMI 1324 says, what's your thoughts on the 2-1-3 era, and what's one thing you wish happened and one thing you wish didn't happen during that era, Mirjam?
So I wish that it's a big one. I wish COVID hadn't happened. That just for like all the reasons. But including to see what that Clippers team would have ended up doing, because they were hitting their stride. And when everything shut down, and then the bubble, they didn't do well in the bubble. They didn't take well in the bubble. And obviously Kawhi's ACL, I think it would have been, it felt like we might have seen them win a championship that year, and I would have liked to see if that team could have done it. I think they could have. And everything since then has sort of revolved around those moments. Those were I think that, those two teams seemed like the teams that were most primed at a shot, and didn't really, bad luck. What's something I wish didn't or did happen? I don't know. That's a good question. I wish, I guess maybe I wish that they'd be more forthcoming with like a lot of like the info that when they could have been. Personally, the
reporter's perspective.
I also wish that they had kept Isaiah Hartenstein on the team.
Ooh, that one hurts, especially now with him in OKC next to SGA, and it looks like they're going to win 60 games this season. That team is tough. Yeah. Alex Caruso there now too. I want to talk to you about a recent player who got an extension. Not Ivica Zubac. He got his. We're happy about that. The more recent player was Terrence Mann. He didn't start Saturday night in the starting lineup. It was James Harden. It was Chris Dunn. It was Derek Jones Jr. It was Norman Powell and Ivica Zubac.
And Zoo, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Terrence Mann is starting.
But today?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think him getting this contract at all affects his minutes and opportunity out there? Because sometimes they say in sports, money plays. And everybody has wanted to see Terrence Mann get more minutes over the years. Do you think this is finally his time?
Yeah, I think yes. Yeah, I think it will be. I think they've invested in him. The thing that if I was a Clipper fan, I would love about both Zoo and Terrence, I have weird expectations of Ivica Zubac. I don't, but that's, you guys have talked about that plenty. But I think what you can love about those guys is they really care. Like as far as professional athletes go, like when last year when the Clippers lost to Phoenix, like you went in the locker room and those were the two guys who were like outwardly upset because they really care. And I think that they are, and then their tenure and their time with the Clippers, like obviously Zoo started with the Lakers, but he's been here for almost the entirety of his career, and Terrence has been here for his whole career, and they're Clippers. And I think it's really cool that the organization has invested in them and is keeping them around. And as far as Terrence goes, I feel like I meet more Terrence Mann fans, T-Man fans out in the world than any other Clipper. Like I think he just has, like, people appreciate how hard he plays and how dependable he is. And I think that is going to set him up well for this season. I think he's going to do a good
Are
job.
those two the easiest interviews possible? I feel like Ivica Zubac and European players in general are just so kind and thoughtful with their answers and take it so seriously every time. And Big Zoo he's amazing in that way. That's one of the reasons he's one of my favorite players ever already.
Yeah, Zoo is great. Absolute gentleman, great guy, hard worker. Yeah, the Clippers are lucky to have him. And Terrence is a good interview too. He's a coach's son, right? So like he can do coach speak. He knows coach speak.
Yeah.
Like he's no Reggie Jackson, but who is? Yeah.
Oh, we got this from Raul Perez saying Miriam picked Hartenstein over John Wall. Love me some Swanson. She officially knows more ball than Double A. I look. I didn't have. I wasn't the GM of the Clippers. I was trying to make the best of a situation where they had John Wall, and I was hoping he would have been better as a Clipper. It didn't turn out that way. Old Dirty Dasher said, "What was Miriam's favorite era? 2-1-3, Lob City, and then also your biggest disappointment with the Clippers?"
So I started covering them in 2018. So I wasn't covering them yet in Lob City. And while I
Transitional
was
period.
like following basketball, yeah. So I mean, I was following, but I wasn't like invested in them like on a day-to-day basis. So, and I don't know if my favorite Clipper teams were the 2018-19 Pat and Lou Clippers, and the year the 2 years that they weren't supposed to do anything, the year with Reggie and Luke Kennard and all their comebacks. Those are the two most fun teams that I had covering, partly because there were little expectations and everybody was just chill. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a favorite era. I'm sorry.
I feel like we might have another one of those seasons upcoming where it is a team that is striving to overachieve and outperform expectations and be the underdog Clippers again, which I think fans are familiar with and they will have a lot of fun with. Unfamiliar with Jeff Van Gundy on the coaching staff, but it's pretty cool to have him. People have wondered forever, when is he getting back into coaching? He's worked with Team USA, but at the NBA level, his teams were always successful. And I guess I saw this stat out there that as a head coach, his teams were never worse than 6th defensively. And he is that defensive guru now with the Clippers. How much of an impact do you think Jeff Van Gundy can have on this coaching staff next to Coach Lou?
So, just talking to folks at Media Day, it sounds like a lot. It sounds like he's making his presence felt, and he's something of a force of nature, especially in a building where there's a lot of like pretty mild mannered. Like, Harden's not the loudest guy, and Kawhi is definitely not the loudest guy, and Ty is pretty chill. But I guess Van Gundy, not so much. So I guess you hear his voice a lot, and that's probably good for defense. And obviously he knows what he's doing. He's been around forever. He's passionate. He loves basketball. We know he's funny because we've got to enjoy it on broadcast for many years. I think it's cool for Clipper fans to you guys get to. I guess we don't hear from Van Gundy, but like that's just cool. Yeah, it's. I think he is going to bring for a team that it sounds like is really going to pride itself on defense. It's important to have a coach that has both the knowledge and the respect to kind of get the troops to do it.
I like that. From a new arrival to a latest departure. JMI 1324 wants to ask you about PG-13 Paul George because he read your article about the split, said it was very detailed and nice. How are you feeling about it at this point? And we're getting very close. I saw him running stairs earlier today at Philadelphia it wasn't doing the Rocky stairs, but just inside the arena. We're getting close to November 6th when he's back here in LA at Intuit Dome for the first time, taking on the Clippers. Is it still weird? Because you felt like, he was a pillar of the Clippers for a long time.
Paul George did a good interview. Like he's, as you see from his podcast, he's good at talking basketball. I 100% see why the Clippers let him go. He wanted the max, the moon, the stars, everything, and that would have put them in the second apron, which would have basically been like, you can't make any moves, and this is a team that makes moves, that has to, especially when you have Kawhi, who's in and out the lineup. You need to have some flexibility, and you just need to have some flexibility anyway. And if you're really gonna handcuff yourself for the sake of a player, it can't be the guy who performed like Paul George performed last year in the playoffs, and who has played who played only like 30 more games than Kawhi in his Clipper tenure, and Kawhi missed an entire season. Yeah, no, I know a lot of people are like, especially in the national. I think Clipper fans, all that kind of are in accord with that. But I know like the rest of the world is like, Clippers are so stupid. Why they let Paul George? But it's the new CBA and the situation, and this way, in a couple years or a year or whenever the time is right, they have the ability to pivot, and that's what they'll do.
Last one for you is kind of a tough one. I'll try to help this one out here. Jonathan Ing wants to know, without getting yourself in trouble, what's the future of newspapers, media coverage? I talked about this with Andrew Greif a little bit. My first comment would be support your local reporters. They do fantastic work, and we need them desperately, especially when it comes to coverage for the Clippers. And everybody here obviously loves you, Mirjam. Just it's always a changing media landscape. It always feels like things are evolving more quicker than ever at an exponential rate. Just how do you see in general this world evolving when it comes to reporting on teams?
That's a good question. And it's a big topic. So, yeah, I guess number one, I'll just echo Adam's thoughts. And like, if you guys like getting those quotes from Kawhi that we're talking about, like that we just, spent 20 minutes talking about, like, what do you think he meant with this? What do you think he meant with that? Those were in response to reporters on the ground asking him those questions. Like teams would love to I think teams and athletes more and more like, we have social media. What do we need you guys for? Right? We could just, we have our own networks or whatever. But they're not going to tell you anything besides give you the Instagram story where everything is like puppy dogs and rainbows, even when it's not. But if you want honest answers, or as close to honest answers as you can get athletes to give you, you need reporters asking the questions. And if you want to keep learning learning more about your teams that you love and are passionate about, you got to support the LA Times, support Orange County Register, support the Athletic. Law, of course, is on the road all the time doing great work. yeah, that's that. You help us, we help you, and it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship. But yeah, because otherwise, yeah, it's the I wouldn't tell anyone to get into this business, but unless you really love it. And a lot of us that are still here doing it is because we do really love it.
I feel like there's some connection between what I do with radio sometimes. These things
Exactly,
parallel one another, and we're trying to
100%.
help it survive because we know or feel like it's still essential. These people are indispensable, reporters and beat writers for teams and the coverage. And I remember when they didn't have, as Andrew Greif was unfortunately let go by the LA Times, coverage from the LA Times on the Los Angeles Clippers. That shook a lot of the foundation of what people's beliefs were in news and reporting. And so we need it. We need it. Please support these great people that have been doing this for a long time, that have the experience, that have the know-how to bring you the stories in the most accurate ways. Mirjam, this has been a lot of fun here to have you on Clippers Talk. I appreciate it. I know everybody in the comments love seeing you in here. I guess we should end with, where should everyone follow you, and how can they help support our local newspapers?
Yeah, follow me. I guess I'm most active on Twitter, so that's at Mirjam Swanson. It's spelled funny, Mirjam. So Mirjam Swanson, SWANSON. Adam tweeted it out, so look at his tweet and you can find it.
I've always wondered, what is that? A boba, a milkshake? What do you have there? A white, a frappuccino, a white mocha?
It's just a coffee. I think it was just coffee.
Just
Boring
black
coffee.
coffee. I'm like trying to go all out.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but thank you guys for reading and interacting and yeah, that's it's really fun, and like I'm always like I try to do a good job, and I try to keep track of what the fans want to know about, because like I'm here to help you guys learn about what you care about.
You are the connection, the conduit to the team. And we'll end with this. Ray JNT said, late to the show, but super happy to see Mirjam on here. Love the OC Registers coverage of the team. We all love you.
Shout out, Adam, shout out to you too, because you do a great job with this team. Like, you're so knowledgeable, and I enjoy. I try to like listen to as many podcasts as I can, but I definitely always catch Clippers Talk, because you're really like on it and have a pulse of the team. And Clips great, and bravo.
I appreciate the love. Until next time, where I think you'll hear me in San Diego tomorrow night for their game at Oceanside. Clippers taking on the Brooklyn Nets. Pregame show starting at 6:30. Carlo Jimenez on the call at 7:30 on the Patriot AM 1150. For Mirjam Swanson, I'm Adam Oslin. This has been another edition